The paranormal may be far from reality for some people, but for others, it's far more commonplace than you might expect. It's time to get comfortable and let the darkness take control. Number 1. My cousin was alone in the kitchen, washing the glasses after the guests had left. It was around 8 or 9 p.m. at the time. While she was washing, she heard some odd noises coming from outside. They sounded like a shriek. Since her family lives in a house by the mountains, with nothing but forests covering every inch of it, she shrugged it off as the sound of animals in the forest. But then she heard it again, a shriek, almost like a laughter, right before the sound of a tree rustling. Not long after, there was the sound of a firecracker exploding a couple of times. Just as soon as she heard the firecracker, she heard the sound of another awful shriek, followed by trees rustling again. She thought that it could be kids playing outside, so she just ignored it. A few minutes passed, and there was a knock on the door. The neighbors came over and told them to pray for protection that night. When they asked about it, they said that they saw a female ghost known as a Pontiac. The neighbors said they heard noises coming from the coconut trees in their compound, and when they went to check it out, they saw the ghost clinging onto the tree, prying open a coconut. They scared it away using firecrackers, and it jumped down into the forest. My cousin didn't sleep well that night. She refused to sleep alone in her room, and slept with her sister for a few nights after that. Now, you may not know what a Pontiac is. They are basically a Southeast Asian version of vampires, only that this one doesn't suck blood, change into a bat, or sleep during the day. Instead, they would sometimes take the form of beautiful young women, and would always carry a single flower that would have a powerful and good smell. The reason why is because they themselves smelt like rotten meat. Their true forms are long black tangly hair with a large white cloth that drags on the ground as they walk. They are also extremely pale with red blood eyes and are said to laugh in a very high-pitched tone. It is said that the Pontiacs are spirits of pregnant women who died before they were able to give birth, which is why there are stories here of women who are about to give birth, seeing them lurk around, seeing them just a few days before going into labor. So, if you're going to give birth, be careful if you see a beautiful woman in old traditional clothing with a single flower in their hair. You may never know what they'll do to your baby. Number 2. My aunt is single and a workaholic, so she has the habit of coming home late. The latest she would usually get home is around 11 p.m, and the earliest would be about 5. She would alternate days in which she would come home early, because it wasn't exactly safe to drive home at night, especially since she lives with my grandparents, who live deep within a village, with the only roads leading into it are very long and lonely. Not to mention that she would have to drive by 2 very large lakes, as well as 2 large palm estates just to reach home. Keep in mind that hijackers nor thieves are her only concern whilst driving alone at night. Here in Malaysia, it is believed that evil spirits dwell in places with water, like lakes, oceans, and rivers. So, if we pass by one at night, we are supposed to throw out a piece of small trash out of our car window just a few meters away from our home. This is to make sure that an evil spirit does not follow us home and will only stop by that piece of trash. Don't ask me why I believe this, but I do. But my aunt doesn't do this, so of course something did end up following her home. One week, my aunt wasn't going with her original schedule of mixing up the times of going home. For 4 days straight, she drove home at exactly 11:30 p.m, except for Friday. That one night, she had to stay until 1:30 a.m. When she got home, she felt something strange. She got out of her car and felt as if she were being watched. Not just ordinary watched, like something with evil intentions was staring at her in hatred. She immediately locked her car, closed the gate, and walked straight towards the front door. As she opened it, she noticed that all the lights in the house were on, and I mean every light. She saw my 2 cousins who were staying over for the holidays, curled up with each other on the bed in the living room. She approached them and asked them what was wrong, as they appeared to have fear in their eyes, and they confessed that they were staying up because they thought they heard something and were getting afraid, so waited for her to arrive. My 2 cousins and grandmother were sitting in the kitchen where the front door is. They were talking to each other, and all were waiting for my aunt to arrive home. It was around 11 p.m. when they heard someone turn the doorknob, before inserting the key and unlocking the door. My cousins and grandmother waited for my aunt to open the door, but nothing happened. My grandmother waited and called for my aunt's name, but there was no answer. Terrified, my cousins went to turn all the lights on in the house and went to the living room to keep an eye on all the doors in the house. My grandmother went to make sure that all the doors were locked in the house. They told my aunt that they really thought it was her, because it made the exact same noises that my aunt does when she arrives home, jingling the doorknob before inserting the keys and unlocking the door and everything. My cousins thought it was someone trying to break in, but nothing else happened for the rest of the night. When my aunt told this to my mother, I felt chills around my body. My aunt says she might know who or what exactly it was, and she blames herself for it. She knew that it was one kind of evil spirit that she must have accidentally brought home from the lakes because of her consistent timing and getting home late that night during the week. Whatever followed her home mimicked exactly the way she'd done before entering the house. The good thing is that my grandmother didn't try and open the door, because if she did, she would have let in the evil spirit. And God only knows what would have happened if she actually did. Ever since that experience, she immediately resumed her normal schedule of alternating the times, because she didn't want another one following her home. Number 3. When my aunt told me this story, it was so casual, as though it was no big deal to her. But I didn't sleep well that night, or for a few nights for that matter, after hearing it. And I swear my mind wasn't helping either, because it kept on creating noises and images that weren't even there. So here's the story. My aunt and uncle were driving down a long and lonely road late one night. They were traveling and decided to use a less crowded road because they needed to get to their destination quickly. This road was long, with nothing but dense forest on both sides of it. Not even a single light or car is available on that road, so you can guess that ghosts or spirits like to lurk around, since there's no one there at night. As they were driving along this road, my uncle saw something in the distance. At first glance, it looked like a person crossing the road, so he slowed down. When they were driving closer and closer, the figure started taking a clearer and more defined shape. Horrified at what he was seeing, he came to an immediate stop. There, right in front of them, was a floating head. The head had long black hair flowing in the air, and from the head attached its spine and organs, but it had no limbs or torso. It was making a jingly sound, like a glass clinking. It floats across the road without taking any notice of my aunt and uncle's presence. Shivers ran all over their body, and they felt the cold breeze that ran to their very core. They were seeing a ghost called a Hantu Balong. My aunt was brave enough to even look at the spirit as it passed, staring at it and trying to find the rest of its body, but saw none. When the head disappeared into the forest, they immediately sped up the car to get the hell out of there. I wasn't sure if they saw anything else that night, but that was enough to scare the shit out of me. It didn't help that I had to stay alone that night either, and I swear my mind likes to psych me out too, by creating that jingly noise that isn't even there. So thanks, Auntie, for giving me all of those sleepless nights after telling me that story. Though it makes me wonder, if such a thing can be seen, who's to say they aren't real? A trick of the mind? A hallucination? It's possible. But what if they weren't either? And how come they both saw it at the same time? Number 4. My cousin lives in a hostel with 10 other girls in one room. All of them were gone, except for her and the girl who sleeps in the bed across from hers. I understand my cousin's hostel is near a forest. You must understand that Malaysia is 62% forest, so this is not uncommon. It was around 10 PM at night, and my cousin was lying down in bed, watching K-drama on her phone with low volume without headphones. Out of nowhere, her roommate called out to her. She paused the video to look at her friend, and her friend had a very fearful face. "What's wrong?" she asked her, and her friend's gaze turned over towards the window of their room before my cousin looked back. "You didn't hear that?" she asked. There was a silence, but my cousin couldn't hear a thing, and she shrugged. "No, I heard nothing." And then it was quiet again. Her roommate's eyes lit up when she stood up. "There it is again! It's still there! You don't hear that!" she half shouted at my cousin. My cousin, getting freaked out, tried to listen for anything, but still heard nothing. "It's a Pontiac. It's laughing outside. How can you not hear that?" She immediately jumps back in bed and curls up under her blankets in fear. Hearing that sent chills up my cousin's spine. But she still couldn't hear anything. "I think you're just imagining things," she says to her and attempts to watch her video again. Her roommate protests, but both didn't leave each other until the rest of their friends returned that night. Although they didn't see the Pontiac that night, something else happened a few days later. 2 of her roommates were in the bathroom around 8, and they noticed that one of the stalls were occupied, but the door wasn't locked. They could see someone's feet as they walked in, so they assumed it was one of the students who lived in the hostel as well. But as they approached the stall, they saw through the slit that it was my cousin. She was sitting there on the toilet, doing nothing. They spoke to her and asked if she was okay, but she didn't reply. They just shrugged it off, and they went back into the room, assuming that she'd probably be back in a few minutes. They went directly into the room, and the moment they walked in, they stopped, because my cousin was sitting there on her bed doing work. "Didn't I just see you in the bathroom?" one of the roommates asked. My cousin looks at her weirdly and shakes her head. "I don't go into the bathroom alone. You know that. I've been here the whole time," she says. Both of her roommates felt chills up their spines, because they knew that they'd just seen her before they left. And even if she ran out of the bathroom to get to the room first, there was no way she could have done so without them seeing. So it was freaky that they saw a spirit that copied the way my cousin looked. Could it have been the same one? Number 5. I have many aunts and uncles, and each of them have their own creepy experiences while working at one point in their lives. The one that I remember the most is the one that told me the stories of her working late at night at an old factory in the middle of nowhere. This was before she was married. There are several incidents that had occurred in that factory regarding the paranormal. My aunt only told me 3 of them, and all of them happened in the women's bathroom. My aunt has to work during the dead hours of the night with few other female workers to help organize documents for the factory. There were only about 5 or 6 of them at work in the office area, so the rest of the factory was dead silent. One night, my aunt wanted to use the bathroom, so she left alone since the bathroom was right down the hall. As she was in there, she heard the main door open. She thought it was one of her colleagues, and then she heard the stall door at the very end slam shut. The way the stall was closed was by no means ordinary. It was a big slam, loud, intentional. It was quiet for a few seconds before another door slammed shut, equally as loud. She immediately felt a chill up her spine when she heard the third door being slammed, and when the stall door next to her slammed shut, she bolted out of there. She didn't look back or anything, and just immediately ran back to the office with her pants halfway down her legs. She indecently burst into the office, terrified, and her colleagues all stare at her. They were all there. No one had left the office ever since she had. They all asked her what's wrong, and she said that she heard something slamming the stall doors over and over. They said that they'd heard it too, but assumed it was her doing. Perhaps she was venting her frustration. She denied it, and said that it wasn't her, and she's not sure who did it. But, in truth, she didn't want to know. On another occasion, another one of her colleagues was in the bathroom fixing up her hijab alone. The bathroom stalls were all open and empty, and she can see them all through the mirror except for the one at the very end. She was minding her own business, and she kept on hearing scuffling and ruffling noises coming from somewhere in the bathroom. She had heard something being torn before another odd noise. She stops and looks around to see if maybe another one of her colleagues came in without her noticing. When she saw nothing around her, she finally realized that the noise was coming from the very stall that she couldn't see inside of. Slowly and scared, she approaches the stall to see what's going on. When she reaches close enough to see inside through the mirror, her heart stops, her body goes cold, and her face turns whiter than a sheet. In the bathroom, she sees a small childlike spirit with long frizzy hair crouching over the toilet, eating away at the trash. She can see blood dripping down its hands as it devours the period pads that were in the can. Alarms went off in her head, and she immediately backed away and ran all the way back to the office and told her colleagues about the incident. Let's just say they all decided to leave earlier than usual that night. The last one is of another colleague of my aunt. She was alone in the bathroom, fixing her hair, and was about to leave when she felt a presence next to her. She turned her head and saw a woman who looked exactly like her. And when her colleagues came in to see what was wrong, the figure was gone. She decided to go home immediately after the incident. Hey guys, it's Mort here, and thank you so much for listening. Thank you for all your feedback on the merch. We're working on it as we speak, and we'll be back up and running in the next few days with some new items. We're trying to take everything that you said on board, and if you have anything specific you'd like to request, drop it in the comments section, and we'll see how to make it happen. And a special thanks to the subscriber who submitted all these stories from Malaysia to make this video possible. Remember that if you enjoyed the video today, please consider dropping a like and leaving a comment, as it's a great way to help support the channel, and I appreciate it tremendously. And if you'd like to do something incredible to help support the channel even further, feel free to visit my Patreon. You can find the link in the description, as well as the links to my social media. And if you want your story read on my channel, you can submit it as a text post to Reddit, or send it to me via email. Both links can be found in the description. But anyway, for now guys, I'm gonna sign off. Stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.